It's absolutely amazing to try to reinvent Hillary Clinton as a peacemaker. Nevertheless, Tim Kaine has introduced a resolution that would force Trump to end hostilities against Iran unless he gets authorization from Congress. I agree with that, quite frankly. I agree with the Constitution. And if they want to get rid of the idea that Congress declares war, they need to amend the Constitution. Democrats need 4 votes from the GOP to pass the resolution. And Lee said, I can say that after that briefing is what changed my mind. I'm now going to support it. I walked into the briefing undecided. I walked out of the briefing decided specifically because of what happened in that briefing. Now I want to play a video clip for you of Rand Paul. He was talking about comments that were made by Lindsey Graham, responding to Lindsey Graham's comments. Let's play that clip, video clip number 1.
They're overreacting, quite frankly. Go debate all you want to. I'm going to debate you. Trust me, I'm going to let people know that at this moment in time, to play this game with the War Powers Act, which I think is unconstitutional, is that whether you mean to or not, you're empowering the enemy. I know you don't mean to, but we live in the real world here. So debate all you want. This is a constitutional democracy, but get ready for a lively debate.
You heard what he said. He's accusing you and Senator Lee of empowering the enemy, his words, empowering the enemy by supporting this War Powers resolution. I need your response.
You know, I think it's sad when people have this fake sort of drape of patriotism, and anybody that disagrees with them is not a patriot. Look, I love my country. I have many family members who have served in the military and continue to serve in the military. You know, I love my country as much as the next guy. But for him to insult and say that somehow we're not as patriotic as he hasn't even read the history of the Constitution. The Constitution specifically says that the war-making power resides in Congress. He believes in this unitary theory of the executive that presidents can do whatever they want. The only way you can stop them is by defunding a war. That's not what our founding fathers said. It's not what the Constitution says. And he insults the Constitution, our founding fathers, and what we do stand for in this republic by making light of it and accusing people of lacking patriotism. I think that's a low gutter type of response.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, Rand Paul is right. As a matter of fact, you heard that that clip that they played of Graham. They began it by saying, I think they're overreacting, quite frankly. Just before that, he said, they're libertarians. I think they're overreacting, quite frankly. That's the full quote. Fox News, which put that together with the interview of Rand Paul, cut out their libertarians. Rand Paul is exactly right. That is what the Constitution says. This is not, they intend it as a slap at President Trump. And it would have been nice if they would have done that at some point in time when Obama was adding war after war, when Obama was continuing the wars of George W. Bush. Obama was the first president who was at war his entire 8 years. We have never been at war as long as we have. We've never had a president who was not even Roosevelt. And so this is unprecedented, but now they're noticing because it's President Trump. But it is the right thing to do, and we'll talk more about that when we come back. Stay with us. Yesterday, I asked the question, actually it's the title of the show yesterday, was Iran pulling a punch with those missiles, or were they just incompetent? Could they not hit the broadside of a barn or military base? Well, today we have a lot more information about those raids, and fortunately, as I said yesterday, I said either way, if they're so incompetent that they can't hit anything and kill anybody, we don't really need to push this further, do we? Or if they were pulling a punch and they signaled that through their statements on social media, then we ought to pull back as well. Let's not rush into this war. And fortunately, and we can all be very grateful and thankful that President Trump took that and pulled back and did not, and has de-escalated. We now have a lot of reports, and of course we had some reports yesterday, I mentioned it, that the Iraqis said that they had been notified prior to the attack and that they had passed that on to the U.S. as well. Now we have more indications, more specific indications. However, they are coming from unnamed U.S. officials. I haven't seen anybody's name officially attached to this. Of course, they wouldn't. That would be essentially career suicide, I guess. But Daily Mail is pointing out that U.S. officials said that they had 3 hours warning, before the Iranian missile strikes. They say that Iran tipped the U.S. off about the attacks via a European embassy as well, besides the Iraqi embassy. The officials say the Iranians also ensured their plans were easily detectable to the U.S. via satellites and eavesdropping. Well, not that they had to do anything to make it easily observable by satellites and eavesdropping, but I don't know what else you do about it to make it any more obvious, because, of course, the U.S. is eavesdropping and watching everything in that area like a hawk. Top U.S. military officer, however, as we pointed out, the same guy who had the debacle earlier this week with the letter, said that Iran's missile attack intended to kill U.S. personnel at the al-Assad base. Army General Mark Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the guy who showed up yesterday and really thoroughly pissed off Mike Lee and Rand Paul, telling them, shut up, do what we say, don't question us, don't debate the war. He said earlier that Iran's missile attack was intended to kill U.S. personnel. Iraqi Prime Minister Abdul Mahdi had earlier revealed that Iran had given him a tip-off about the missile strikes, in which they were able to pass on and give troops time to seek shelter in bunkers. Mahdi said that Iran did not give specific locations to him, but said they would only target locations where U.S. forces were present. As the missiles were raining down, he said he got a call from Washington to say they already knew about the assault. Thanks, we already knew about it. We have the statement from General Milley, who said points of impact were close enough to personnel and equipment and so on and so forth. I believe, based on what I saw, what I know, is that they were intended to cause structural damage, destroy vehicles, equipment, and aircraft, and to kill personnel. Now, this is the guy who earlier in the week, we had the letter that came out. He and Secretary of Defense Mark Esper had their press conference. And just think about how this evolved over a period of time. I didn't talk about this yesterday, or the day before, actually. This letter that it was written in response to the Iraqi parliament saying we would like for the U.S. to withdraw. It's been long enough now, or whatever. And there was a letter that was drafted that said we are preparing to do exactly that, to comply with your request. When that was put out, once the letter was posted online, there was a scramble at the Pentagon, the White House, Capitol Hill, elected officials, policymakers, military advisors, all these different people, journalists. What's going on? And so we had a lot of different stories coming out of the Pentagon bureaucracy from this same General Milley and from Defense Secretary Esper. Within a matter of hours, writes Zero Hedge, it went from authentic to phony to part of an effort to sow active disinformation. And then finally, at the confused press briefing by General Milley and Defense Secretary Mark Esper, it was an unauthorized draft, but an honest mistake. And remember, their statements were so contradictory, so confused at the press conference that after they left, the press is like, what's going on? They came back and then clarified it and said it was an honest mistake. And they have had egg on their face from lying to us all week. And so the question is, was this something that was an attempt to kill people, or was it not? Was it incompetence? Scott Ritter has a piece on RT. Now, Scott Ritter is a former U.S. Marine Corps intelligence officer. He served with General Schwarzkopf in the Gulf War, the first one. Then he was a UN's weapons inspector from 91 to 98. And this is his take on it. He said, Tehran did warn Iraq to spare U.S. soldiers. And now we've had reports that it went through a European embassy as well, 3 hours before. They were very concerned. They did not want to escalate this, but they did want to be seen to be doing something. And this is what Scott Ritter says. In the hours, of course, following the attack, they tweeted out, "We do not seek escalation or war, but we will defend ourselves against any aggression." He said the most important aspect of Iran's action was the way its missiles were targeted. For years now, Iran has made significant strides in terms of reliability, range, and accuracy of their ballistic missiles. Gone are the days when their arsenal was simply Soviet-era Scud missiles. This is the first time these weapons had been used against the U.S. From the U.S. perspective, the results were sobering. It resulted in no casualties among U.S., Iraqi, or coalition forces. However, it was actually Tehran's way of showing the accuracy of their ballistic missiles. And if you look at those pictures, you can see that there's a row of buildings, and for example, I think it's like 4 buildings in one particular picture. And you can see one of those 4 buildings was taken out dead center. He said commercial satellite images show the Iranian missiles struck buildings containing equipment with precision previously only thought by advanced powers such as U.S., NATO, Russia, and China. They fired 17 missiles at al-Assad. 15 hit their targets. 2 failed to detonate. They also fired 5 additional missiles at the U.S. consulate in Erbil. U.S. commanders on the ground said that it appeared Iran deliberately avoided striking the consulate, but in doing so, sending a clear message that had it wanted to, the consulate would have been destroyed. So that's the take of a U.S. Marine, intelligence officer who worked with Schwarzkopf, who was a UN's weapons inspector for many years. His belief was that it was intended to show that they had better capabilities than we thought, but also to show that they were pulling a punch. We're going to be right back, and we're going to talk about what happened with the plane in Ukraine, however. Interesting series of events developing around the Ukrainian airliner that at that same time happened to crash, killing all 170 people on board. We'll be right back. Stay with us. We have a very unusual set of circumstances